Before we start with today's lesson, why don't we see the answers for the activity fill in the blanks and question answers of last lesson? You were supposed to identify the pictures. I think it was very easy. Mummies, pyramids, sphinx, hieroglyphics, and sun god. Fill in the blanks. The first civilization of the world is Egyptian civilization. This civilization was born on the banks of River Nile. The pharaoh who built the biggest pyramid at Giza was Khufu. Alexander the Great of Greece conquered Egypt. The last queen of Egypt was Cleopatra. The statue with the body of a lion and head of a human is Sphinx. Answer the following questions. First one, which is the longest river in the world? Answer, Nile is the longest river in the world. Second, why is Egypt called Gift of Nile? Answer, if Nile had not flown through Egypt, it would have become a desert like the other places of North Africa. Hence, it is called Gift of Nile. Third, who is a pharaoh? Name the first pharaoh. Answer, Egyptian kings were called as pharaohs and the first pharaoh was Menes. Fourth, what is mummification? Answer, Egyptians believed in life after death and preserved dead bodies by a process called mummification. Fifth, name the script of Egyptians and what does it mean? Answer, the script of Egyptians was called hieroglyphics and it meant sacred writing. Sixth, who was called the first empress of the world? Answer, Hatshepsut was called the first empress of the world. Children, do you remember what we did in the last class? We spoke about the first civilization, the Egyptian civilization. We spoke that Nile is the jewel of Egypt and Egypt is the gift of Nile. And we also spoke about pharaohs who were the emperors of Egypt. And who was the first pharaoh? Yes, Menes. And we spoke about the other pharaohs and how Alexander came and conquered Egypt and it was settled under his general Ptolemy, and how the Egyptian civilization ended with Cleopatra and it came under the Romans. We also learnt about the pyramid of Giza. We learnt about the contribution of Egyptians, right? We learnt about the importance of agriculture, wheat and barley and mummification. We learnt how they worshipped the sun god and the different elements of nature, the different guardian deities which they had. And children, what are pyramids? Yes, they are only buildings which is built on top of the tombs, inside which you had the bodies of the pharaohs buried. And we learnt about their excellence in geometry and maths in building the pyramids. We learnt about the statue of Sphinx and their writings. What is the script of Egyptians known? Yes, hieroglyphics. And what does it mean? Sacred writing. So let's start today's class. What do you see on the screen? You can see a map of the civilizations. And where does the arrow point? Yes, it points to Mesopotamia. Can you see the small map, children, on the right hand corner? Yes, Mesopotamian civilization is a civilization which is present on the present Iraq. What we now known as the Iraq country was where Mesopotamian civilization first flourished. You can see there are so many things marked over there, especially you can see the Tigris and Euphrates. We do know, the children, that without rivers we don't have any civilizations. Now you just remember this map. When we are learning about this civilization in detail, you will require to come back and refer to this map. So today we are going to take up the lesson of Mesopotamian civilization. This word Mesopotamia literally means the land between rivers. Which rivers, children? Yes, Tigris and Euphrates river. We saw in the prior slide that this area, there are two main rivers which are running, Tigris and Euphrates. So this land which had a civilization between these two rivers were known as Mesopotamia. So today we're going to learn about Mesopotamian civilization. Come children, let's learn. Now you can see the map on the right corner. The central area of this civilization was the southern part of the valley. You know what a valley is, isn't it, children? Between the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. Now, from the olden time, this particular area is called as Babylonia. Can you see written on the map? Babylonia. The northern part of Babylonia was called Akkad. The southern part of Babylonia was called Sumer. And the portions which is northern of it was known as Assyria. You can see only two things are marked here, Assyria and Babylonia. Assyria is the northern portion of Iraq, which is the northern part of Mesopotamian civilization, and the southern part is Babylonia. This Babylonia itself can be divided into two. It's called Akkad and Sumer. Now further, you can see that reference to this civilization has been found in Old Testament. It is said there are many places which are mentioned in the Old Testament are still available here in Mesopotamian civilization. Now, don't we want to know how it became a civilization? The two rivers, Euphrates and Tigris, made this vast Asian barren land very fertile. Of course, without water, humans cannot do anything, and they usually try to settle on the banks of rivers. So this is a West Asian part which is rather barren, but when the river started flowing through it, it became very fertile. Since the food crops were grown with very little effort, the northern hilly tribes and the southern tribes of the deserts tried to control this area. See, it's very easy. They're all desert nomadic people, different tribes. But when they find fertile land where you can grow lots of crops, it attracted all these tribes to them. Thus, the northern and the southern tribes started quarreling with each other to take control over this place and slowly settled here. Thus emerged a civilization which was strong and brave, and this was the ancient civilization of Mesopotamia. So, what are things we have learned today? Here in this slide, that the ancient Mesopotamian civilization was formed of the warring tribes of northern and southern tribes, and it is known as the land between the rivers. So this area was ruled by many tribes. As we know, it is formed by tribes only. What are the names of some of the important tribes are Sumerians, Babylonians, Hittites, Assyrians, and Neo-Babylonians. There are many races. We are going to tell only the important races. Sumerians, Babylonians, Hittites, Assyrians, and Neo-Babylonians. We learnt about many tribes, and Sumerians were the first tribes who were responsible for the first civilization in this region. They were the ones who created a little bit of order in this region and created a proper settlement of civilization. Now, children, we know that the land is very fertile because of two rivers. And we also know that civilization was formed here because of the fertility of the land. So what happened is that these two warring tribes were forced to cooperate with each other because the food was surplus. They were having so much of agriculture, so much of food grains were prepared. So there was no need for many of the people to be involved in agriculture. So what happened is most of them left agriculture and started involving in other fields like craftsmen, laborers, merchants, officials and so on. But for this they needed lot of cooperation among each other. So slowly they cooperated among each other and the small settlements turned into villages, which turned into towns and then became independent and self-sufficient city-states. We call them city-states because they were independent. They had all the money and all the officials and they could take care of themselves. So like this evolved the system of city-states in Mesopotamia. You can see on the map there is Ur, Lagash and Kish. These three are the most important city-states of Mesopotamia. Ur, Kish and Lagash. Actually there were totally 12 city-states. And one unfortunate thing is that there is not much connection between these city-states. So eventually they all remained independent to each other and they couldn't consolidate it into one force. So what are the three city-states over here? Ur, Kish and Lagash. There is one important and very interesting information about Ur. Did you know this Ur city-state is believed to be in the Old Testament as the birthplace of Abraham, the one who started Christianity or Muslim or so on, supposed to be the birthplace of all religions. Very interesting, isn't it, children? The Sumerians were the one who introduced a type of script which is known as the cuneiform. Now you can see on the screen that this is a logosyllabic script. That means you don't have any writings, they're all drawings. Cunis means signs, different kinds of signs. That is a writing which is created with different signs is known as a cuneiform script. And this was introduced by the Sumerians. And it is also known that the Sumerians had contact with the Indians. Later on, when we are learning about Harappan civilization, we will find out there are many seals and coins used by the Mesopotamians which are found in our indigenous civilization. That shows that there is a trade route. As you can see on the screen on the map, there is a water body which is connecting Mesopotamia and India. So this also shows that the Mesopotamians were excellent traders. They knew how to travel by water and they must also be very good in shipbuilding industry because it takes a lot of time to travel from Mesopotamia to India. So what is the script called, children? Cuneiform script. The Sumerians had entered Mesopotamia in 4000 BC and they had ruled strongly and given a strong foothold and they gave peace to Mesopotamia. But later on they were overpowered by the Akkadians. Now these Akkadians were one of the tribes of the Arabian desert. They belong to the Semitic tribe. Now Semititis means it's a language, children. It's a language which is a mixture of Syrian language as well as Arabian language, which is spoken by the Arabian desert nomadic people. So these Akkadians were also Semites and they came and they ruled after Sumerians over this particular place. But after 1,000 years of rule, these Akkadians were destroyed and conquered by the barbarians. Barbarians were another kind of nomadic people who came and captured this place. You know that all the city states were flourishing with lot of money, wealth, and they had so much of fertility. So the barbarians conquered and destroyed Akkadians and set up their rule for some time. But later on, Amorites, who were another Semitic tribe, they captured, destroyed the barbarians and set up the Amorites' rule. They brought the Akkadian state under their control and they unified it and created a very large state. So, who ruled after the Sumerians? The Akkadians. How was the Akkadian rule destroyed? It was destroyed because of the barbarians. Now, who destroyed the barbarians and created their own rule? Amorites. Amorites brought the Akkadian state under their control. The greatest contribution of the Amorites is their great king who was known as Hammurabi. He was the most famous king who ruled from Babylonia. He made a center of power as Babylonia. He framed the codes of justice and made Babylonia to be considered as the best administrated kingdom in the whole of the old world. That is during that time when it was all fully nomadic tribes were capturing places. It was Hammurabi who set up a system of justice. Children, when we were learning about the government, when we learned about human rights, we have come across this code of laws. Hammurabi was the king who set up the code of laws in which he has explained how each and every crime has to be dealt with. The first form of justice was introduced by Hammurabi. About this code of laws, we will learn in detail when we are learning about the contribution of the Mesopotamians. The Amorites were later defeated by the Kassites, who were another nomadic tribe who rolled over for some time. Then they were defeated by Hittites. Now, these Hittites, who came later, occupied the entire valley and destroyed everything which they couldn't carry. So, these Hittites were defeated by another tribe known as the Assyrians. Now, the Assyrians were named so because they worshipped Asura, the desert god. And the Assyrians occupied the whole of West Asia and Egypt till the 7th century and collected taxes from all the people there. The most important king of the Assyrians was Assurbanipal. He was the last great king of Assyrians. He was a brave warrior, an excellent poet, and he founded a royal library at Nineveh. This royal library at Nineveh has collections of thousands of clay tablets. Children, the cuneiform script itself was written on clay tablets when the clay is still wet. If they could write on it, and when it dries up, it will become strong and remain so. Like that was how the cuneiform script was written. So this royal library had thousands of collections of such clay tablets, and also it has the famous epic of Gilgamesh. We will learn about Gilgamesh later. Now this is an excellent source of the complete information regarding the people of ancient East. So it is a wonder and a treasure for all the historians because they can get so much of information from this library. So who was the most famous king of Assyrians? Assurbanipal. What was his greatest contribution? He founded a royal library at Nineveh. The Assyrians were further defeated by another Semitic tribe called the Chaldeans. Now, the Chaldeans re-established the importance of Babylonia, and the most greatest king of the 7th century of this particular Semitic tribe called the Chaldeans was Nebuchadnezzar. Who was the most important king? Nebuchadnezzar. Now, this name Nebuchadnezzar is referred to a lot when you're learning about Christianity, because it is said that he had conquered Jerusalem, which is also the birthplace of the Jews, and he had banished many tribes over there. He is referred to as a very malevolent king and all that in such testaments. But in truth, he encouraged the study of science and he built what was known as the hanging gardens. This hanging gardens was considered as one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. What do you think a hanging garden is, where all the plants will hang? Actually, in truth, it was not like that. In truth, the trees and the gardens were grown in such a way that they were at different levels. Like one level, the second level is still higher level, then the third one a still higher level, and so on till they were up to quite a bit of elevation. But when you saw only the bushes and the tree branches, they looked as if they were hanging from the top. It created a look like a hanging garden. So it was considered as the one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. It is said that Nebuchadnezzar had built this hanging gardens for his wife Amytis, who was from Mede, a place which was filled with beautiful gardens. Since she longed for her birthplace, he built this wonderful garden to keep her happy. So one of the greatest contribution of Nebuchadnezzar is his hanging gardens. The Babylonian Empire was constantly challenged by internal threats. They were constantly warring among each other. After only 5 successions, the Chaldeans fell, and many other small nomadic tribes came after that. And at last, in 540 BC, the Great, who was known as Cyrus the Great, the emperor of Persia, marched into the city of Babylon and took control. And he made it a part of his kingdom along with Syria as well as Judea. He combined everything and made it one big empire, the Persian Empire. With this fell the Mesopotamian civilization. Later on, the Romans and Turks also took control over this particular region, and at last it came under Alexander. So, the main reason for the downfall of Mesopotamian civilization was that it came under the control of the Persian Emperor Cyrus. Like every other civilization, there are a lot of contributions from the Mesopotamian civilization to the world. Now, let us learn about the contributions. The greatest contribution of the Mesopotamians was the system of code of laws, and Hammurabi was the emperor who created this code of laws. It was a system based on an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. It's like tit for tat system. The main purpose was to create such a law that nobody would dare to perform any crime. See, if the people knew that they would be punished very severely if they performed some crime, the crime rate would reduce. That was Hammurabi's idea. Punishments were very severe and they were actually based on the person's social class and ranking. In Mesopotamia, they were like we had in our ancient Vedic period also, they have different rankings. You have the higher people, the kings, then you have the priests, then you have the working class, and so on. So, usually the punishments were based on the person's social class and ranking. Now, I can tell you some examples of code of laws. For example, one of the code of law was that if a person commits robbery, he should be immediately put to death. The second was if a person causes fire to another person's house, he will be thrown to that fire. And if one person causes blindness to another person, immediately the person who caused the blindness will be blinded. So if one person breaks the bone of another, his bone is broken. So what you can see in this code of laws is that a person is punished according to the mistakes which he does. Simple. If he causes the loss of a tooth, remove his tooth. He causes blindness, make him blind. So this was the system which Hammurabi brought into existence. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Now totally the code of Hammurabi had 282 laws, and each and every law decided the penalty which the person had to pay to the Babylonian king. Remember, children, this is some 1700 BC, such ancient times itself, there was justice. It was written on a stone monument. You can see on the screen, it was just like this on a stone monument which stood approximately 7 feet tall. And this stone monument was known as a stele. The upper portion, you can see the picture, no? The upper portion of the stone monument. You can see it is Hammurabi who is sitting in front of the seated sun god. It says that God is sitting and Hammurabi is looking at him. It is also said that it is the god who gave him the idea for all the codes of laws. Okay. Hammurabi's code included more than 282 laws. Now, children, there is only one example of this codex now. It's an 8-foot tall codex stone which has been found out by the Egyptian archaeologists, and it is now kept in a museum in Paris. The most important thing about this code of laws, children, is that there was a very bad practice of slavery which was going on in ancient civilizations. When we learnt about Egyptian civilization, we came across that a very sad state where humans were made slaves to other humans. The importance is that Hammurabi prohibited the abuse of slaves. He said that a slave was a person who worked for you, but you had no right to starve him or punish him unnecessarily. That is the most excellent feature of the Code of Laws. The economic conditions of Mesopotamia was very good, and they made surplus grains, and they were excellent tradesmen and craftsmen. So automatically they had wonderful trade relations with Egyptian civilization as well as with the Indus Valley civilization. When we were learning about Egyptian civilization, also at that time we had told that they had trade relations with Mesopotamia. And when we are learning about Harappan civilization, again we'll come across this trade relation with Mesopotamia. Also, in Mesopotamia, we have found remnants of some of the seals and coins which belong to Indus Valley civilization, and some of the hieroglyphics of Egyptian civilization is also found in Mesopotamia. This strengthens the idea that there were trade relations between Egypt, Indus Valley civilization, and Mesopotamian civilization. The ancient Mesopotamians believed a lot in their gods or in deities. They believed that their gods lived in heaven, but the god statue was the physical embodiment and power of the god himself. As such, a set of priests were assigned to take care of these statues. These statues will be clothed and feast would be given to them. And a deity's temple was supposed to be the literal place or the place of staying of the deities. And these deities used to be taken out in long processions. And number 7 was very important to the Mesopotamians. They believed that there were 7 most powerful gods who took care of them and who helped them. Hence, they believed in the god of sun, the god of moon, the god of celestial bodies, and so on. And they also believed that every city had a guardian deity. So you can just realize that the Mesopotamians had lot of gods, and they had lot of temples in which they had statues of the different gods. And every city would have a temple with one particular god which would be the deity of the city along with the other temples of the different gods. What do you see on the screen? The beautiful ziggurats. What are ziggurats? They are the temples of Mesopotamia. There is an interesting fact behind that, children. We know that the first tribes who came and created this particular civilization are the Sumerians. Now, these Sumerians are hilly tribes. So, what are they used to? They are used to going on top of the hills to pray to their gods. But once they came and settled on the valleys of Mesopotamia, they needed a raised platform from which they can pray to their gods. Thus came the concept of ziggurats. So, what did they do? They created artificial hills in the form of ziggurats. Now, one more thing, children. The Mesopotamians did not have idea of how to make steps. So, what they did is they created a very big platform and slowly they rose up the building step by step by creating elevations, and for each elevations they used planks. So there was an elevation where people could walk up and they could pray to their gods as an elevated place. Usually the ziggurat would have a topmost portion where they housed the deity as well as the priest who prayed for the deity. It's like a complex. It is not just one big building. There is a lot of buildings inside that which gives you the final look. And they are made from sun dried bricks. That is why you have that color to the ziggurats. Usually a ziggurat will also be accompanied by some other temples along with them. A beautiful architectural wonder, children. Now, the Jews called these ziggurats at the towers of Babel. Interesting, isn't it? The most important contribution of the Mesopotamians is the Epic of Gilgamesh. Now, this was composed somewhere probably during the Middle Babylonian period, 1600 BC or so. And the protagonist or the main person on whom this poem is written is a person called as Gilgamesh. That is why it is termed as Epic of Gilgamesh. Maybe this Gilgamesh is one of the kings, but in this epic, he is treated as a demigod who has superhuman strength and who befriends the god of Enkidu and fights with many orcs. And he has the bull of heaven with him. Many such stories. This epic has many instances where Gilgamesh is fighting with the bad, taking the help of gods, where he's helping himself the gods, and how he managed to survive the great flood. You can see that there are a lot of substantial influence of the Odyssey poem also. But on the whole, this poem was lost. The tablets of this poem was lost, but rediscovered by Assurbanipal when he built his royal library. He managed to rediscover it and establish in his library, so we are able to find out about this epic of Gilgamesh. So children, what did we learn today? We learned about Mesopotamian civilization. Which are the two rivers? Tigris and Euphrates. What is the literal meaning of Mesopotamia? The land between two rivers. We learned that the Sumerians were the first tribes. There were many other tribes which ruled over Mesopotamia. We had learned that Mesopotamia had trade relations with India. We also learned about the Code of Laws, Hammurabi, and we learned about Assurbanipal, his royal library. We learned about Nebuchadnezzar, his hanging gardens, and the cuneiform script of the Mesopotamians. In the contributions, we learnt about the code of laws, the system of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. We learned about the different number of deities the Mesopotamians have and how each and every city had a guardian deity. We also learned about the importance of ziggurat and we learned about the trade relations. So with this we have completed Mesopotamian civilization. We have completed the lesson, so please take out your classwork and write the important points. The Mesopotamian civilization. This civilization flourished in the area that lies in a valley between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. In Greek, Mesopotamia means the land between the rivers. This region was ruled by the Sumerians, Babylonians, Hittites, Assyrians, and Neo Babylonians. Political history. Sumerians were the first civilization in this region. Ur, Kish, and Lagash were the important city-states that flourished here. Hammurabi, he was the most famous king among the Babylonians. He was famous for his code of laws. Assurbanipal, he was the last great king of Assyrians. He founded the royal library at Nineveh. Nebuchadnezzar, he was the greatest king of the Chaldeans of the Semitic tribe. He created the Hanging Gardens, which was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Finally, about 2500 years ago, Emperor Cyrus conquered the city of Babylonia, which resulted in the downfall of Mesopotamia. The contributions of Mesopotamian civilization. Mesopotamians were the first to adopt the code of laws in the world. Mesopotamia established trade relations with Harappa and Egyptian civilization. Each city had a guardian deity. High raised temples called ziggurats were built here. Cuneiform script was used by these people. Gilgamesh is a great epic poem of Mesopotamia. Now let us start with activity. These 3 pictures were already in this lesson. Just identify them. Fill in the blanks. Dash were responsible for the first civilization in Mesopotamia. Second, the last great king of Assyrians was Dash. Hanging Gardens was created by Dash. The downfall of Mesopotamia was due to the conquest of this land by Dash. Assurbanipal founded a royal library in Dash. Sumerians wrote in Dash script. Each city of Mesopotamia had a Dash deity. Answer the following questions. What does the word Mesopotamia mean? Name the tribes which ruled Mesopotamia. List the famous city-states of Mesopotamia. Who established the code of laws? What is a ziggurat? Name the epic poem of Mesopotamians. The answer to all this will be discussed in the next session. Thank you.